Maple Creek was one of those quiet American towns that time almost forgot. One traffic light blinked endlessly at the crossroads, a small diner sat on the corner where people still greeted each other by name, and life rolled at its own unhurried pace. There were seasons, sure, spring painted the hills green, summer turned the air golden, and winter wrapped everything in white, but in Maple Creek, not much really changed. Except dreams. Dreams always changed. They started strong and bright in the young, and then, somewhere along the way, they began to fade. Ethan Cole was 27, and his dreams were still burning, at least in his mind. He was the kind of guy who had big ideas, loud ambitions, and endless tomorrows. When he talked, people listened. He could make anyone believe he was destined for greatness. One day, he'd say with that confident grin, "I'll have my own business. I'll be somebody in this town." And people believed him, at first. But when the sun came up the next day, while everyone else went off to work, Ethan stayed in bed. His father, Hank Cole, was the complete opposite. A mechanic who'd built the town's only auto shop with his bare hands, Hank believed in hard work, not hard talk. Every morning at 5, he'd wake before dawn, coffee steaming in his old chipped mug, and head to the shop. By the time most people were hitting snooze, Hank had already fixed 2 engines. Ethan admired his father, he really did, but he didn't want to be him. He'd say, "Dad, I'm not meant to fix cars all my life. I've got big ideas. I'll do something bigger." Hank would just nod, half smiling. "That's good, son. Just remember, big dreams still need a wrench." But Ethan didn't listen. He always had a plan for later. He told himself he'd start tomorrow. Then tomorrow turned into next week. Next week turned into next month. And before long, his plans were just stories he told himself to feel better about doing nothing. Ethan wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't lazy out of malice, he just had a habit of waiting for the perfect time. He'd wake up at 9 or 10, stretch, grab his phone, and scroll through motivational videos online. He loved hearing about people who'd made it, entrepreneurs who started with nothing and became millionaires. He'd nod along, thinking, "That'll be me someday." But after the video ended, he'd just sigh, toss his phone aside, and whisper, "I'll start soon." And he believed it. Every single time. The people around him started to notice. His childhood friends, Luke and Kyle, still hung out with him at the local diner. Luke ran a small landscaping business. Kyle did construction work. Neither was rich, but they were proud, busy, and steady. One afternoon, over greasy fries and milkshakes, Luke said, "Hey man, I could use an extra hand on a big job next week. Pays decent. You in?" Ethan laughed. "Me? Cutting grass in the sun all day? I've got bigger plans, Luke." Luke smirked, leaning back in his booth. "Yeah, but those plans still waiting for you to start, huh?" Ethan frowned. "It's not that simple. I'm working on an idea." Kyle chuckled quietly. "You've been working on an idea since we were 20. The word stung, even if they were true. Ethan brushed them off, forcing a smile. "You'll see. One day, I'll prove you both wrong." "Hope you do," Luke said softly. "Just don't wait too long, man." That conversation followed Ethan home like a shadow. His house sat on the edge of town, next to a field his father had once tried to turn into a small garden. The soil was rich but overgrown with weeds, like Ethan's own life, full of potential but untended. That evening, Hank came home covered in oil, the smell of metal and hard work clinging to him. He saw Ethan lounging on the porch, a sweet tea in hand, eyes on the sky. "Long day, son?" Hank asked gently. Ethan smiled. "Thinking day. Gotta plan things before I start, you know." Hank took off his cap and wiped his brow. "Planning's fine. But don't plan so long that the seasons change before you plant anything." Ethan rolled his eyes playfully. "You sound like Mr. Garner again." Mr. Garner was their neighbor, a 70-year-old man who still worked his land every day. Ethan often watched him from his porch, hoeing soil or trimming hedges while whistling off-key tunes. Garner was cheerful, simple, and full of energy, everything Ethan admired but didn't imitate. Later that week, as Ethan sat scrolling through his phone, a knock came at the door. It was Mr. Garner himself, holding a basket of fresh vegetables. "Brought these from my garden," the old man said with a grin. "Figured you might like something grown with a little sweat." Ethan laughed. "Thanks, Mr. Garner. You sure work a lot for your age." Mr. Garner chuckled. "That's the secret, boy. Keep working, stay young." He squinted at the empty patch of field beside Ethan's house. "When you gonna turn that dirt into something?" "Soon," Ethan said automatically. Garner nodded slowly. "Soon, who?" "Be careful, son. I've seen more dreams die in the word sooner than in failure itself." And with that, he tipped his hat and walked away. Those words, "dreams die in soon," echoed in Ethan's head for days. But instead of pushing him to act, they just made him feel guilty. And guilt, like comfort, can be paralyzing. Then came the high school reunion. At first, Ethan didn't want to go. The thought of seeing old classmates who'd actually done something with their lives made his stomach twist. But curiosity won. When he arrived at the decorated gym, laughter filled the air. People hugged, shared stories, compared wedding rings and careers. Ethan stood by the punch bowl, pretending to be busy. He overheard conversations about promotions, houses, and family trips. Sarah, the girl he'd once liked, was now a teacher. Dylan, the class clown, ran a successful car wash business. Mike, the ex-football star, owned a gym. Ethan Cole. "Man, it's been forever," Mike said, slapping his shoulder. "What have you been up to?" Ethan hesitated. "Just working on some plans. Thinking about starting a business soon." "That's great, man. Keep at it," Mike said kindly, though his eyes flickered with polite doubt before he turned away. Every smile that night felt like a reminder of what Ethan hadn't done. He left early, his chest heavy. When he got home, the house felt too quiet. He sat on the porch in the dark, the chirping crickets filling the silence. His father joined him after a while, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Reunion go well?" Hank asked. "Yeah," Ethan lied. "Everyone's doing great." Hank nodded. "Good to hear." A long pause. Then Hank said softly, "You know, son, success isn't about being faster than others. It's about not stopping when things get slow. I don't care if you start small, just start." Ethan stared into his coffee. "I will, Dad. Tomorrow." Hank looked at him, sadness flickering behind his tired eyes. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "is the busiest day that never comes." That night, Ethan lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. He thought of his friend's calloused hands, his father's wisdom, Mr. Garner's words, and his own reflection, full of talk, empty of progress. By sunrise, he finally stood up, walked outside, and breathed in the cool morning air. It felt new, almost sacred. "This is it," he whispered. "Today's the day." He went to the shed, pulled out a shovel, and walked to the empty field beside the house. The soil was hard, dry, and tangled with weeds. "No wonder nothing grows here," he muttered, jabbing the shovel into the earth. He worked for half an hour before his hand started aching. The sun rose higher, the sweat poured, and within an hour, he was exhausted. He dropped the shovel and stared at the half-dug patch. "I'll finish later," he told himself, walking back toward the porch. He never returned that day. By the next morning, the motivation was gone. His muscles ached, the sun was too bright, and the voice in his head whispered again, "You deserve rest. You can try again tomorrow." He obeyed. Days turned into weeks. The weeds grew thicker, and the field looked worse than before. But Ethan told himself stories, stories about the future, stories that made him feel safe even as time slipped away. Then, one afternoon, as the cicadas hummed in the distance, Hank fell ill. A fever that seemed small at first grew worse by the day. Ethan drove him to the clinic, where the doctor frowned and said they'd need to run more tests. Ethan stayed by his father's bedside that night, watching the man who had carried their family's world on his shoulders now look fragile and pale. "Dad," Ethan whispered, voice trembling, "you'll get better soon." Hank smiled faintly. "Don't worry about me, son. Just promise me something. Anything. Don't waste your time waiting for tomorrow. Life doesn't owe you a perfect day to start." Ethan swallowed hard. "I promise." But promises are easy when pain is near. It's when comfort returns that they fade. And in the days to come, Ethan would learn, sometimes life doesn't wait for you to change. Sometimes it forces you to. Because tomorrow, for Ethan, was about to disappear. The days after Hank Cole's illness began felt heavy, like the air itself had slowed down. The hum of Maple Creek seemed quieter, the diner chatter softer, and Ethan's world smaller. He'd never seen his father still for so long. The man who once rose before dawn now struggled just to get out of bed. Ethan sat by the window every morning, staring out at the repair shop across the road. The doors were locked. The lights were off. The sign that read Cole's Auto Service since 1983 hung crooked in the wind. The shop had always been the heartbeat of their family, the sound of tools clinking, the smell of oil and rubber, the music of hard work. Now, silence had taken over. One afternoon, the local mailman knocked on the door and handed Ethan a stack of letters. He flipped through them absent-mindedly until one caught his eye, an overdue notice for the shop's property tax. His heart sank. He hadn't even realized how many bills his father had been keeping up with alone. That night, Ethan sat by Hank's bedside, pretending to read a book while his mind raced. "Dad," he finally said, "what happens if the shop closes?" Hank opened his eyes slowly, smiling faintly. "Then someone else will open theirs. That's how life works, son. It keeps going, with or without us." Ethan frowned. "But that shop is your life's work." "And maybe," Hank said softly, "it's meant to become yours." Ethan looked down, ashamed. "I don't even know where to start." Hank chuckled weakly. "Starting's never been your problem, son. It's finishing that you run from." The words hit hard, but Hank wasn't trying to wound him. He was teaching, even now, in weakness, still trying to shape his son into something stronger. The next morning, Ethan woke up before sunrise. He brewed coffee, like his father always did, and sat in silence, watching the steam curl upward. For the first time in years, he didn't reach for his phone. Instead, he stood up, grabbed the keys, and walked to the shop. The door creaked as he pushed it open. The scent of oil and dust filled the air. Tools hung neatly on the walls, untouched for weeks. On the workbench sat an unfinished engine Hank had been repairing, a client's truck, half done and waiting. Ethan ran his hand across the metal. Cold. Heavy. Real. He had no idea how to fix it. But he knew what his father would say, "You learn by trying." He spent the morning just cleaning, sweeping floors, wiping surfaces, organizing tools. It wasn't much, but it was something. Every clang of metal felt like a heartbeat returning to the shop. Around noon, Mr. Garner walked by and saw the open door. "Well, I'll be," the old man said, peeking inside. "Didn't expect to see you in here." Ethan smiled faintly. "Trying to keep things running while Dad rests." Garner nodded approvingly. "Good. That place doesn't just fix cars, son. It fixes men who aren't afraid to work." Ethan laughed softly. "Guess I'm still learning that part." Garner's eyes softened. "Then learn fast. Life doesn't slow down just because you're catching up." That week, Ethan juggled caring for his father and cleaning the shop. For the first time in years, he had a routine. It felt strange at first, waking early, working with his hands, coming home tired but satisfied. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt real. But change never comes easy. By the third week, fatigue set in. The spark faded. The whisper returned. You've done enough for now. You can rest. You've earned it. Ethan listened. He slept in one morning. Then another. Within days, the shop was closed again, and the old rhythm of laziness crept back. Then, one evening, as he scrolled through his phone, he heard a soft voice from the next room. "Son," Hank called weakly, "can you come here?" Ethan rushed in. His father was sitting up, holding something in his trembling hands, a small wooden box. Inside were old photos, yellowed receipts, and a note folded in half. "What's this?" Ethan asked. Hank motioned for him to sit. "That's your grandfather's box. He started this shop during a drought. Had nothing but borrowed tools and stubborn faith. I kept it to remind myself what we come from." Ethan opened the note. It was a handwritten quote. "Dreams are seeds. They grow only in the soil of work." Hank smiled faintly. "He used to tell me that when I was your age. I didn't get it back then. But I do now." Ethan stared at the words, something tightening in his chest. "Dad! I've wasted so much time." Hank reached out, his rough hand covering Ethan's. "Son, time's only wasted if you stop using it. You can still plant something." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. He nodded, unable to speak. The next morning, he woke before dawn again. The air outside was crisp, the horizon streaked with pink. This time, he didn't hesitate. He went straight to the shop, turned on the lights, and stood there in silence, breathing in the scent of purpose. He didn't know where to start, but he knew he had to start somewhere. He called Luke, his old friend. "Hey," Ethan said nervously, "I need your help. You know anyone who needs car repairs? I'm reopening my dad's shop." Luke sounded surprised. "Seriously? That's awesome, man. I'll spread the word." Within a few days, 2 small jobs came in. A broken alternator. A leaking radiator. Ethan fumbled, cursed, and made mistakes, but he kept going. He watched online tutorials, asked questions, and even called old customers for advice. Each completed repair brought a strange new feeling, pride. When he handed the first customer their keys, the man smiled. "Your old man would be proud. You did good, son." Those words felt like sunlight on a cold morning. But the journey wasn't smooth. A week later, the tax office sent another notice. The shop owed more money than Ethan had. Panic clawed at him. He thought about giving up again, selling the tools, walking away. That night, he sat on the porch, staring at the half-moon. Mr. Garner stopped by, carrying his usual wisdom and a jar of homemade jam. "Looks like the world's on your shoulders," the old man said, sitting beside him. Ethan sighed. "The shop's drowning in bills. I don't know if I can keep it." Garner nodded slowly. "You know, when I was your age, I lost my whole crop to a storm. Thought about quitting farming for good. But my wife said, you can't control storms, but you can control how long you stay down. So, I got up and started over." He looked Ethan straight in the eyes. "Son, storms don't kill people, surrender does." Ethan swallowed hard, the words hitting deep. "I don't want to quit. I just don't know if I can do it alone." "You ain't alone," Garner said. "You've got your father's hands, your grandfather's grit, and a community that wants to see you win. That's more than most." Ethan nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir." Garner patted his shoulder. "Just remember, comfort is a thief, and laziness is its accomplice." Then he stood and walked away, leaving Ethan with those words burning in his mind. The next morning, Ethan made a decision: he wouldn't run anymore. He started taking on more jobs, even the messy ones. He learned to manage bills, negotiate prices, and work long hours without complaint. Each day ended with aching muscles and grease-stained hands, but also with satisfaction he'd never known before. His body was tired, but his spirit was alive. He realized something profound: discipline didn't kill dreams, it protected them. Still, a shadow lingered: his father's health. Hank was getting weaker. Some nights, Ethan would sit beside him and talk about the day's work, hoping his father could hear the pride in his voice. "You'd be proud, Dad," he'd whisper. "I'm doing it now. I'm finally doing it." And though Hank rarely spoke, sometimes he'd smile faintly, and that was enough. But one cold autumn night, everything changed again. Ethan woke to the sound of a phone ringing. It was the hospital. His father had taken a turn for the worse. He rushed there in minutes, heart pounding, hands trembling. When he entered the room, Hank was pale, breathing shallowly. Ethan took his hand. "I'm here, Dad," he whispered, voice breaking. Hank's eyes opened slowly, a faint smile on his lips. "You kept it going, didn't you?" Ethan nodded, tears streaming. "Yeah, Dad. I did. And I'll keep it going. I promise." Hank's hand squeezed his weakly. "Then I can rest easy." Those were the last words he ever said. The funeral was quiet, simple, and filled with stories. People from town came, customers, neighbors, friends, each one telling Ethan how much his father had helped them. And every word felt like a seed of pride planted in Ethan's heart. But grief has a strange way of showing you who you are. Standing by his father's grave, Ethan made a silent vow. He would no longer live by tomorrow. He would live by today. Dear listener, sometimes life whispers, and sometimes it shouts. For Ethan, it shouted through loss. He learned what too many of us forget: dreams die not from failure, but from waiting too long to begin. Every tomorrow you promise yourself is another today you lose forever. Don't wait for life to shake you awake. Don't wait for tragedy to teach you urgency. Start now. Move now. Do something, even small, because the world doesn't reward ideas, it rewards effort. Ethan's warning is for all of us: the longer you wait, the louder regret becomes. The winter after Hank's death was the coldest Maple Creek had seen in years. Frost bit at every windowpane, and the wind whistled through the gaps in the diner doors. The town moved slower, quieter, like it was mourning with Ethan. He still opened the shop every morning at 6 a.m., just like his father used to. He swept, brewed coffee, and stood by the window as the sun rose over the lot. But the warmth he used to feel, that quiet pride, was fading. Grief had a way of hollowing things out. The customers who'd come after the funeral began to dwindle. The repairs trickled in slower each week. Some said times were tough. Others just didn't come back. Ethan tried not to take it personally, but deep down, it felt like failure was waiting for him again, patient, familiar, and cruel. One evening, he sat alone at the workbench, bills spread out before him. The math didn't lie. He was running out of money. The radiator he'd fixed last week had been returned, a faulty part, a refund demanded. The delivery company had delayed his next shipment. And his rent, already overdue, was now 2 months behind. He pressed his palms into his face, the weight of everything collapsing in his chest. "Dad, I'm trying," he whispered into the silence. "I'm trying so hard." But no voice answered back. Outside, snow began to fall, coating the shop sign in white. By January, Ethan was working 14-hour days just to stay afloat. The shop lights flickered into the night, the hum of old engines and the hiss of air compressors echoing into the quiet streets. But exhaustion doesn't wait for permission, it just takes. He skipped meals. Lost sleep. Started snapping at customers. One afternoon, he dropped a wrench, and when it clattered to the floor, something in him broke. He punched the wall, breathing hard, chest tight. Luke stopped by later and saw the bruise on his hand. "Man, you look like hell," he said softly. Ethan forced a laugh. "I feel like it. Why don't you take a day off? Go fishing or something. Clear your head." Ethan shook his head. I can't stop now. If I stop, everything falls apart. Luke sighed. It's already falling apart, brother. You're just trying to outrun it. The words stung, because they were true. Weeks passed, and Ethan began to change. Not in the ways people expected, but in quieter, darker ways. He became more impatient, more distant. The same man who once took pride in every bolt and screw now worked just to survive another day. One night, while closing up, he caught his reflection in the shop window, unshaven, tired, eyes dull. He barely recognized himself. Is this what being a man means? He muttered. Working until there's nothing left. But deep down, he knew the answer wasn't simple. His father hadn't taught him to chase exhaustion, he'd taught him to chase purpose. Somewhere along the way, Ethan had confused the two. Then came the breaking point. A big job, a transmission rebuild for the county's snow plow truck, was supposed to save him financially. He'd worked 3 straight nights on it, running on coffee and sheer willpower. But when he tested the engine, it sputtered, coughed, and died. He tried again. And again. And again. Nothing. He slammed the hood shut, heart pounding, frustration boiling over. Why can't anything go right? He shouted. The sound echoed off the walls and died just as quickly. He sat on the cold floor, surrounded by scattered tools, and felt something he hadn't felt in months, the pull to quit. It whispered like an old friend, you gave it a shot. No one would blame you for walking away. And for the first time, Ethan listened. He closed the shop early, shut off the lights, and went home without looking back. Days turned into weeks. He stopped opening the shop. Stopped answering calls. The sign out front stayed dark, dust gathering on the counters inside. He told himself it was temporary, a break, not surrender. But the truth was simpler and sadder, he'd lost faith. He spent his days on the couch, watching reruns and scrolling endlessly. The same routine that had once defined his old life had found its way back in. Only now, it didn't feel like comfort, it felt like defeat. The shop that once gave him pride now haunted him. One evening, there was a knock at his door. He almost ignored it, but something made him get up. It was Mr. Garner again, holding a small cardboard box. Thought you might need this, the old man said, setting it on the table. Inside were sandwiches, a thermos of coffee, and an envelope. What's this? Ethan asked. Garner smiled faintly. Something your dad left with me before he passed. Said you'd need it when you were ready. Ethan hesitated, then opened the envelope. Inside was a note in Hank's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means you've hit the wall. That's good. Every man needs to hit it once, hard. Because that's when you learn if you're willing to climb it. Beneath the note was a folded paper, a list of names. Old customers. Loyal ones. People Hank had helped over the years. And at the bottom, a simple line. They believed in me. Maybe they'll believe in you too. Ethan stared at the paper for a long time. His throat tightened, and his hands began to shake. He looked up at Garner. Why didn't you give this to me sooner? Garner smiled gently. Because you weren't ready to hear it. Your father knew you'd need to lose everything before you'd listen. Ethan sank into a chair, clutching the note. I failed him, Mr. Garner. The old man shook his head. You didn't fail him, son. You just forgot who you were working for. This wasn't about proving yourself to the world. It was about honoring where you came from. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at the table, the note in one hand, coffee in the other, the weight of his choices pressing on him. He thought about all the mornings he'd wasted, all the times he'd said, tomorrow. His father had built something from nothing. And Ethan had almost let it vanish in grief and pride. Around 3 a.m., he stood up, grabbed his jacket, and drove to the shop. The parking lot was covered in frost. The windows fogged. But when he turned on the lights, the place looked alive again, waiting. He walked to his father's workbench, placed the letter there, and whispered, "I'm not done yet." The next day, Ethan started making calls. He reached out to every name on the list. Some remembered him. Some didn't. A few offered sympathy, others offered work. And slowly, painfully, business began to return. He fixed small things at first: brakes, oil changes, old engines. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the doors open. And this time, he did it differently. He didn't rush. He didn't seek validation. He just worked, steadily, quietly, faithfully. Months passed, and spring returned. Ethan still missed his father every day. But when he walked into the shop each morning, he felt something new: peace. One afternoon, a teenage boy came in looking for part-time work. Nervous, hands stuffed in his pockets, he said, "Sir, I heard you might be hiring." "I don't know much, but I can learn." Ethan studied him for a moment and smiled. "You're already halfway there. Come on, I'll show you how to change an oil filter." As he spoke, he caught his reflection in the window again, the same tired eyes, but now with something his father once had: purpose. Sometimes life breaks you not to destroy you, but to rebuild you correctly. Ethan thought success meant never falling. But life taught him that real success means standing back up, especially after you've fallen hard. He learned that hard work isn't punishment, it's redemption. And when everything falls apart, that's when you find out what you're truly made of. So if you've fallen, if you've failed, if you've stopped believing, remember this: you haven't lost until you stop trying. Spring melted the frost from Maple Creek's rooftops, and with it, something inside Ethan began to thaw too. The grief was still there, like a quiet echo, but it no longer chained him to the past. It pushed him forward. The shop smelled of oil and pine cleaner again. Sunlight cut through the dusty windows, landing on a workbench that no longer sat idle. The hum of tools filled the air, not rushed, not frantic, but steady. Ethan had changed. The lazy dreamer who once waited for opportunity had become a man who made it. The first few weeks of rebuilding were brutal. Ethan woke before sunrise, stretched his aching back, and made a pot of strong coffee. He'd stand in the doorway of the garage, watching the morning light spill over the parking lot, whispering, "Let's get it right today." He worked 12-hour days, not because he had to prove himself anymore, but because he finally believed in what he was building. Each repaired car, each satisfied customer, added a small piece back to his spirit. The teenage boy, Tyler, was still learning, clumsy with tools, sometimes impatient, but Ethan saw himself in the kid. "Take your time," Ethan told him one afternoon as they worked on a pickup's carburetor. "Fast work breaks things. Real work builds things that last." Tyler nodded, wiping grease from his hands. "You sound like my dad." Ethan smiled faintly. "I sound like mine too." As word spread that Hank's boy had reopened the shop, the townsfolk slowly returned. Mrs. Walters brought in her old minivan. Sheriff Ray stopped by for a tune-up. Even Luke, who'd moved out of town for a job in the city, came back one weekend just to see Ethan's progress. The shop wasn't just alive again, it was thriving. But more than money or customers, what Ethan found most valuable was respect. The kind of respect you earn when people see you fall and then watch you rise. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Luke leaned against the counter and grinned. "You did it, man. You brought it back." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Now. I just stopped running from the work." Luke nodded. "You think your dad would be proud?" Ethan looked around, at the glowing lights, the sound of laughter, the life returning to the place that once defined them both. "I think," he said softly, "he'd tell me to stop talking and get back to work." They both laughed. That night, Ethan closed up late. As he locked the front door, he caught sight of the wooden sign above the shop, Hank's Auto and Repair. The paint had chipped, and the wood had weathered. He ran his hand over it thoughtfully. "You carried this name your whole life," he whispered. Maybe it's time I carried it too. The next week, he added 3 new words beneath the sign in bold white paint. And son. It wasn't about ego. It was about legacy, a quiet promise to keep the dream alive. But success didn't come without tests. One Friday afternoon, a corporate dealership tried to buy him out. They offered cash, benefits, and a management position in the city. On paper, it was everything Ethan used to want: money, status, comfort. He took the weekend to think about it. That night, as rain tapped softly on the roof, he sat with Tyler in the shop, watching the storm. Tyler looked at him curiously. "You're gonna sell, huh? I mean, they're offering a lot." Ethan didn't answer right away. He just listened to the sound of the rain. "You know," he said finally, "there was a time when I would have said yes in a heartbeat. I used to think success was about what you had. The house, the car, the money. But now, I think it's about what you keep. Your values. Your peace. The people who depend on you." He leaned back in his chair. "If I sell, I lose the very thing that made me get back up in the first place." Tyler nodded, absorbing every word. "Then don't sell." Ethan smiled. "Yeah. I think I just needed someone to remind me." He declined the offer the next day. And for the first time in his life, he felt rich, not because of what he gained, but because of what he chose not to lose. Summer came fast, filling Maple Creek with long, warm evenings and the hum of crickets. Ethan started a mentorship program at the shop for local teens. Every Friday, after work, he gathered them in the back lot and talked about more than just engines. He spoke about life, the weight of excuses, the trap of tomorrow, and the quiet war between ambition and laziness that everyone fights. "Your future isn't built in a day," he told them one evening, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's built in every choice you make today. Every small act, every habit. That's what makes you. Or breaks you." The kids listened closely. Some were shy, some restless, but all of them felt the gravity in his words. "Don't be like I was," Ethan said. "Don't let laziness steal your dreams. It's faster than you think, and it doesn't knock before it enters. It just takes, quietly, until there's nothing left." The teens nodded, and Tyler smiled proudly from the corner, arms crossed. That night, after everyone left, Ethan sat outside on the steps. Fireflies blinked in the grass. The air smelled of summer rain. He thought about how far he'd come, not just from where he'd started, but from who he'd been. He remembered the nights he'd sat in the dark, the days he'd felt like quitting, the mornings he almost didn't open the door. Now, every sunrise felt like a second chance. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for letting me fall enough to learn how to stand." In late August, the town held its annual harvest fair. Maple Creek wasn't big, but it was proud. There were pie contests, live bands, and the smell of roasted corn in the air. Ethan had been invited to speak at the small business panel, something he would have laughed at years ago. When he took the microphone, his palms were sweaty, his heart thumping hard. He looked out at familiar faces, neighbors, customers, friends, and began. "You all know my story," he said with a smile. "The boy who talked big and worked small. The man who lost everything before he learned what a work really meant." There was soft laughter in the crowd. "But here's what I learned," he continued. "Ambition without discipline is like planting seeds and never watering them. Dreams only live when you do. And laziness? Laziness grows wild. If you don't pull it out early, it'll take over everything you've built." He paused, scanning the faces before him. "Every one of us has those 2 seeds inside," he said. "One is ambition, the other is laziness. The seed you water is the life you'll live. I used to water the wrong one, until life taught me the cost." He took a deep breath. "So if you've been waiting for tomorrow, stop. Tomorrow's not the problem, it's the excuse. The best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is now." The crowd broke into applause. Ethan smiled, not proud, but grateful. After the fair, Luke approached him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Man, you sounded like one of those motivational guys on YouTube." Ethan laughed. "Guess life gives you enough lessons, you either share them or drown in them." Luke grinned. "You ever think about telling your story? Like for real, online or something?" Ethan hesitated. "Maybe one day. For now, I just want to keep the shop running." Luke nodded, but something in Ethan's mind lingered. Maybe his story could help someone else, someone still stuck in the trap he once lived in. Later that night, he sat at his desk with a pen and notebook. He wrote 3 words across the top of the page. "Don't wait tomorrow." And beneath it, he began to write his story, honestly, humbly, from the heart. Not as a mechanic. Not as a son. But as a man who had learned what it truly meant to begin again. Dear listener, life will always give you reasons to wait, the right moment, the right motivation, the perfect plan. But waiting kills dreams faster than failure ever will. Ethan's rise wasn't about luck or talent. It was about choice. He stopped chasing comfort and started chasing character. He learned that every sunrise is a test. Will you move, or will you delay? And that's the same choice waiting for you. Don't wait for inspiration. Don't wait for the right time. Start today. The years had passed quickly, yet deliberately, like a river carving a canyon over time. Maple Creek had changed, a little brighter, a little busier, but Ethan had changed even more. He wasn't the boy who waited for tomorrow. He was the man who woke every day to do what mattered, no matter how hard, no matter how small. The shop was thriving, yes, but the true growth was inside him. One crisp morning, Ethan opened the shop and breathed in the familiar scent of oil, metal, and sunlight. Tyler was already there, wiping down a workbench with a careful hand. "Morning, Mr. Cole," the boy said, a shy smile on his face. "Morning, Tyler," Ethan replied warmly. "You ready to learn something new today?" Tyler nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir." And as the day began, Ethan realized something profound. The work he once thought was just about engines was now about people. About teaching, guiding, and passing on lessons that went far beyond the metal and grease. The community had noticed the change in him too. His shop became more than a place for repairs. It became a hub for mentorship, a quiet center for learning, responsibility, and perseverance. Teens who once wandered aimlessly now came to him, curious, willing to listen. He'd tell them, ambition isn't what you say you want. Ambition is what you do. It's the seed you water every single day with your choices and your effort. Sometimes, he'd pause and look out the window, thinking of his father. "I wish you could see this, Dad," he'd whisper. "I finally understand." And then he'd teach again, because understanding alone wasn't enough, it had to be shared. The shop had survived storms, financial struggles, and even Ethan's own doubts. But the real triumph wasn't the money, the reputation, or the long list of satisfied customers. It was the knowledge that he had become the kind of man his father had always believed he could be. The kind of man who didn't wait. Who acted. Who kept promises, to himself, and to those who believed in him. One summer evening, as the town prepared for the annual fair again, Ethan received a letter. It was from a youth organization in the city, asking him to speak at a conference on mentorship, resilience, and entrepreneurship. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. A few years ago, he wouldn't have even opened it. He would have thought, not me. Too busy. Too small. But now, he understood. Opportunity wasn't about luck, it was about preparation and action. He packed a small bag, drove to the city, and took the stage in front of hundreds of young people. "Good morning," he said, voice steady, resonant. "I'm here to tell you a story. A story about a boy who talked big, dreamed bigger, but didn't act, until life forced him to. His name was me. My name is Ethan Cole." The crowd was silent, hanging on his every word. He spoke about laziness, about waiting for tomorrow, about the price of procrastination. He spoke about failure, grief, and the lessons that only come when you hit the wall and almost give up. And then he spoke about rising, not for fame, not for wealth, but for legacy, for purpose, and for the people who depend on you. You have two seeds inside you, he said. One is ambition, one is laziness. Which one grows depends on you. And every day is your chance to water the right one. Don't wait for tomorrow. Start today. Start now. The applause was thunderous. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't known before, not pride, not ego, but fulfillment. Back in Maple Creek, life continued quietly. The shop still hummed with activity. Tyler had grown confident, almost like a son to him. Neighbors came for advice, guidance, and even just to talk. Ethan walked the street sometimes, watching the sunrise, and thought about how far he'd come, from a boy who procrastinated to a man who built something lasting. And he remembered his father's words, "Don't waste your time waiting for tomorrow." He hadn't wasted it. Not anymore. On a warm autumn day, as the shop's front door swung open, a small group of children ran in laughing. "Mr. Cole," they shouted. "Teach us something." Ethan knelt down, smiling. "All right," he said. "Let's start by learning something very important. Ambition is a seed. And every day you water it, it grows. But if you ignore it, laziness will take over, and it will destroy everything you hoped for. So, what will you do today?" The kids cheered. They wanted to learn. They wanted to grow. Ethan realized then that his legacy wasn't the shop. It wasn't the repairs. It wasn't even the money. His legacy was every seed he helped nurture, every young mind he inspired to act, to grow, and to never wait for tomorrow. He stood in the doorway as the sun set, the sky ablaze with gold and crimson. And in that quiet moment, Ethan smiled. Not because he had reached perfection. Not because he had avoided failure. But because he had finally learned the one lesson that mattered most. Dreams don't work unless you do. And now, he would spend the rest of his life making sure others understood that truth before it was too late. Dear listener, Ethan's journey is a mirror for all of us. Life doesn't wait. Opportunity doesn't knock twice. Ambition doesn't grow in empty hands. Every day you delay, laziness spreads quietly until it chokes the very dreams you once cherished. But it's never too late to begin again. Start today. Water your ambition. Pull out the weeds of procrastination. Build your legacy. Because the seeds you plant now, no matter how small, can grow into something extraordinary. Don't wait. Your tomorrow begins now. If this story touched you, please subscribe and comment where you're watching from.